Maybe AI can suggest team building activities, but AI can't sit across from somebody who maybe is lacking confidence and rebuild that belief in themselves. They can't have that conversation. So be proud of that, right? Trust requires vulnerability. It requires us to be consistent. It requires us to show up, our presence. Those are human currencies. AI can't replicate those. Hey everyone, welcome to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I'm John Espinosa, your host. This is where I share my 20 years of leadership experience, especially in building teams, so you won't make the same mistakes I did, and your team will become something more than you even had managed. And today we're going to talk about the impact of AI, and there's conversations happening right now. They're happening in boardrooms, they're happening in these leadership meetings, HR departments across the country. And if you're a leader, it's about you. If you're a manager, you're in that conversation. The conversation is, which one of our managers do we still need? Not which ones are nice, not which ones have been here the longest. Which ones do we still need? Now that AI can do half of what they used to do, and it's not hypothetical, that's happening right now. And by the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly where you stand and what to do about it. So stay with me because this one really matters. And the setup here is a call that I got a few months ago from a leader. I had worked with this individual years back, really good leader. They were dedicated to their team. They're the kind of person who shows up early, stays late. They genuinely care about their team and especially the people that they interacted with on a day-to-day basis. But this wasn't a good one. The organization this individual was working with had gone through a restructure, and they brought in AI, specifically tools to handle reporting, scheduling, some performance tracking, I believe, and some of the workflow management. And when the dust settled, 3 leadership positions were eliminated. They got cut, and he was one of them. And he said, John, I don't understand. He said, I did everything that we worked on. I continued to grow. He said, I hit all my numbers. My team liked me. But they told him that his role, it had become redundant. And the system could handle most of what he was doing. And here's what hit me about the conversation. He wasn't a bad leader. He was a darn good leader who was doing the wrong work. And he'd spent years perfecting these tasks that eventually AI could do now. And they could do them faster, they could do them cheaper, they were more consistent with them. But because of that, he never built the skills that a machine can't replicate. And that's the gap. That's the gap that's growing every single day. So today we're going to talk about what separates the leaders who will thrive from the leaders who will be replaced. And not necessarily by AI itself, but by other leaders who learned how to use it. So by the end of this episode, I want you to understand. I want you to understand that there are 3 leadership shifts right now, that these skills make you irreplaceable in any AI-driven workplace. And a personal action plan, we're going to give it to you. That action plan is going to future-proof your leadership starting this week. So let's get into it. Our 3 topics today. We're going to cover 1, the great leadership divide. And I'm going to answer the question on why AI is splitting leaders into 2 categories and how to make sure that you're on the right side. The second topic are those 4 irreplaceable leadership skills. Now, these are specific capabilities. They're capabilities that AI can't replicate. And they are going to define who stays and who goes. And then last but not least, I'm going to give you a plan. We're always going to give you a step-by-step framework that positioned yourself as a leader in your organization that they just can't afford to lose. So let's talk about this first topic of what is the great leadership divide? There are two types of leaders emerging in today's workplace, and we're watching a real-time split right now. A lot of organizations that I go into, there are two categories forming, and every single leader out there, every single one of you, are drifting towards one of them. So category one is the task manager. And I labeled this the task manager because it's the leaders that they value what organizational information, what they've built their value on organizational information, tracking progress, maybe compiling reports, making sure nothing falls through the cracks, right? I had a senior VP that I worked with out of sales, and man, he loved his spreadsheets. And that's what he was known for. He was the spreadsheet guy. So he would fall under this task manager category. And I'm not saying either one of these categories are bad, because in the task manager category, you still have very reliable people. They work hard, right? And AI, though, is coming for every single thing that they do. So let's talk about the other one. Category 2 here is going to be what I call the cultural architect. And this is a leader's value who is built on the trust building, the relationship, the judgment under pressure. They have the ability to develop people. And I think that is the single most important characteristic when it comes to leadership, is now you have to go and develop others. You have to work through others, right? They tend to use AI as a tool, but they're irreplaceable because their value is human here. And I want you to understand that this divide isn't about intelligence or work ethic. It doesn't have anything to do with either one of those. It's about where you are investing your energy. And you may be asking yourself, as I did, is why are organizations making this shift? So I got some research for you. Gartner predicts that by the end of this year, 2026, 20% of organizations will use AI. They're going to flatten it. They're going to use AI to flatten out their structures. And that means eliminating more than half of the current middle manager positions out there. Now, this isn't a future prediction anymore. You've heard me just tell a story about it is happening. It's happening in most organizations. It's not just the bottom, tiered people that are being cut or AI is replacing those jobs. They are roles are being cut. And they're not the ones that are building culture. They're the ones that are managing workflows. They're the ones that AI can manage workflows, automation, tasks. And one of the other things that I felt was important to say is, again, more research around why organizations are making this shift now is PwC describes this as a shift from, think of it, as most of our organizations, their pyramid structure. There's a CEO at the top, and then there's layers of management until you get down to the workforce, right? Well, that shift now is going to become more of an hourglass. There are going to be fewer people in the middle. So what does that say? You got to have capability at the top and the bottom. And the uncomfortable truth that most of you are not hearing is, if somebody can describe your job in the organization that you're working as like making sure that you just get things done and you spend your time on reporting and, getting results together, I'm sorry to say, but your role is at risk. And that's not because you're doing it poorly. You may be the best spreadsheet putter together ever, developer ever, but it's because AI does it without getting tired. And they're going to do it for cheaper. They do it without getting distracted. They don't need the salary and benefits. So leaders who are out there, maybe going through this shift, maybe you're a middle manager out there and you've already seen cuts. You've already seen organizations or your organization talk about how AI is going to be implemented. Leaders who survive this shift won't be the ones who work the hardest. They're going to be the ones who are working on the right things. And, when I was working with an organization, this is just something else that builds to the credibility of why we're talking about this today, is this organization had about 200 employees, and their leadership team, I want to say, was around 12. So when they started integrating AI into their operations, they didn't lay off anybody, right? It was something that they were just looking for opportunities. But they did something that made every single one of those leaders pay attention. They went around the room, and I remember specifically this question is they asked each manager, what do you do that AI can't? Now think about that. I mean, if you're out there listening and you're probably asking yourself, all right, what can I do that AI can't? Well, the way that this worked out, some of the leaders, they had strong answers. They talked about how they mentor folks, that they are able to navigate conflicts, right? They build maybe some cross-functional relationships within internal and external to the company. They're able to make judgment calls, right? When you might not have all the data there. But some leaders, they really struggled with this. Some of them answered, well, I make sure that things run more smoothly. Well, it's not a wrong answer, but it's a vulnerable one, in my opinion, because making sure that things run smoothly is exactly what AI is designed to do. And what happened within a year is that 3 of those 12 positions, they were restructured. They didn't eliminate them overnight, but they gradually absorbed, or they were gradually really taken over by AI systems. And they redistributed all of those remaining tasks to the leaders who brought the human value. So leaders who stayed, necessarily, they weren't the smarter ones. They were just more experienced. They were more human in how they led. And again, research backs this up. IMD's 2026 forecast projects that a 10 to 20% reduction in traditional middle management, okay, these are middle management positions, will occur by year's end. And the roles that are most at risk are those organized around information routing. You're just a passer of information from the executive boardroom all the way down to the workforce. Do you do basic type coordination? Do you document and summarize? So these are things that we need to be aware of. Again, I'm not creating a doom and gloom environment, but what I want each one of you to walk away with is an appreciation and to begin to really question, all right, which category do I fall in and what am I doing to fix it? So the hard question here, I want you to sit with and ask yourself, if your organization asked you today, what do you do that AI can't? What would your answer be? And if you can't answer that clearly, just like some of the bosses, some of those leaders in the room, 3 of them, they didn't do a good enough job answering that. You may be in a strong position that possibly could be overtaken by AI. But this episode, I'm going to help you build that answer, because we're going to talk about next the specific skills that AI can't replace. So get out your journals, get out your notes, because now this is what really you should be listening for. And if you're listening out there and you're not subscribed, go out and click that subscribe button. Please, it's easy, it's free. It allows us to build this channel. It allows us to get out more information, to feed back in. And I promise that I'm going to show up every single episode and to deliver the content that you need. So let's break down these 4 skills that matter the most. And when I was putting these skills together today, I was on a run earlier and I'm thinking about, all right, what are the specific things, John, that you can let the listeners know, let the audience know about leaders that you've worked with in the past that have got promoted or have survived maybe some initial restructuring, right, of organizations. So let's get into them, because these 4 capabilities are things that no AI system, no matter how advanced, will replicate. And these are what make you worth more than any single dashboard that they could possibly create or put together, any of the algorithms out there, or any other automated workflow tasks. So do you want to know? Are you ready? I'm going to go through these, and then we'll quickly go back and I'm going to dig into each one of these. But the 4 skills that we're going to talk about are: 1, the trust architect; 2, contextual judgment, your ability to have that contextual judgment; 3, developmental investment. Okay, how are you growing people? We mentioned that earlier. And then the 4th, emotional regulation. And we'll talk a little bit about detachment when we get there, but those 4 are the things that AI, I don't care how advanced, I don't care how much money that they put into it, there's no way that AI is going to be able to replicate these. So let's talk about the first one, trust architect. Trust architecture is our ability to build, maintain, really, or repair trust. And this can be with individuals or it can be across teams. And this occurs especially in times of uncertainty, or we're going through a big change, or we're in the middle of some type of conflict, right? Because think about it, trust isn't a feeling, it's a system. And leaders who architect or are able to architect a system of trust, I mean, I want them on my team. I'm going to keep them, because AI, it can't do it. It can't track every single one of our engagement and then score it and then flag it. You know, that piece, like, one thing I want to make clear here is that, you know, maybe AI can suggest team building activities, but AI can't sit across from somebody who maybe is lacking confidence and rebuild that belief in themselves. They can't have that conversation. So be proud of that, right? Trust requires vulnerability. It requires us to be consistent. It requires us to show up, our presence. Those are human currencies. AI can't replicate those. So what does that look like, though? Every single, one of these, I want to put it into practice. And for me, this trust architecture, one of the things that we tell ourselves, and they're lies, is I have to know when a change is coming across. Like, I got to know everything. I got to have it all figured out. That's untrue. Just quit it. Stop telling yourself that. Things like words matter. So when you're talking to your team, I know this change feels uncertain, but let them know what you know. Here's what I know, and here's what I don't know. And then here's what I'm going to do to find out. Or when I tell you, and if I can tell you at that time, we'll call a stand-up meeting. I did this we were going through return to office, bringing everybody back into the workforce. There was a lot of tension, a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety around that. I didn't have all the answers, right? But one thing that I did do is I let them know I could answer certain questions. Some things I couldn't answer because we were still trying to figure them out, but I was vulnerable with them. I also think that it's okay to admit when we're wrong. That's part of being a trust architect is, hey, I made a mistake and I'm going to own that mistake. So here are the things that we're going to do differently now, right? Or I'm going to do differently. Imagine that. Imagine if you're hearing that from your boss, from your direct supervisor. I mean, if you're having those conversations and you're able to sit across from somebody, that's where the real power of team building comes in. AI can't replicate that. Maybe I will give you a script, but you're the one that's still going to have to act it out. And I'll tell you, I've been training a long time. When you think you got something figured out, It's going to change. So again, trust architecture, skill number one. Start thinking around how you fit into each one of these skills here. Because the second one, just a quick pause in our episode, this might be exactly what you need to hear. If you're currently leading a team or you want to lead a team and you're spending your days putting out fires, you're not failing, you're just stuck. Because when everything feels urgent, nothing actually improves. And over time, that starts to chip away at our confidence as a leader. I've led teams under pressure for years, and firefighting isn't about effort, it's about those missing leadership systems. When expectations are clear and ownership is real, our teams, they stop reacting and they start solving problems without us. So if you're ready to lead instead of react, click on the link below, book a call, check out our consulting programs. All right, back to the episode. Is going to be on judgment. So contextual judgment. And for me, I define that as the ability to make decisions when data is incomplete. You're in a high-stake environment, and the right answer isn't always the obvious one. So this is leading in what I would like to call the gray zone. In frameworks, they're great, but they don't make the decision. And so when I think about, all right, how could AI replace this, or how can't AI replace this? AI excels in inputs, define parameters, creating those frameworks, give it data, and it gives you patterns. But when most decisions are made or needed to be made that define your leadership, they happen in that gray zone. They happen in between the data points. There's things like, I always say, should you promote the tenured team member? That may be a conflict that you're having with yourself, right? Or what about that newer individual? So there are things about, should you push back on a directive? Maybe you're getting some communication down and you don't necessarily agree with it. So how else are you going to get aligned unless you make a judgment call? These contextual judgments require us as leaders, you out there as the listeners, to read people. We have to understand the politics of the situation. I can't tell you, unfortunately, politics, they're part of the leadership game. And I talk to a lot of leaders out there that they don't like it. I don't like it. But it's a necessary evil, right? And things that we have to do, like weighing cultural implications and trusting our gut. And all of those are informed by our experience. So how do we put this into practice? Because sometimes the data will say X or Y, but your experience with your team tells you to do the opposite. And then explain why, right? Because a lot of times when we have to make the call and there's not a playbook, we still have to stand behind it. It doesn't give us an excuse to say, well, this is the first time we've been doing this. Because if we don't stand behind it, that's going to set a precedence. So skill 2, contextual judgment. Do you have contextual judgment? That's the question. Let's get into skill 3. Skill 3 is a developmental investment. So this is our ability as leaders out there. If you possess this skill, we see potential in people before they see it in themselves. And I think that's an important part. I've had great leaders, great mentors in my life that saw potential in me way before I saw it in myself. And they put me in situations where then I was able to develop it. And that's what this skill is. Having this developmental investment is something that AI, it may suggest based on past previous performances, but what's that thing that you had one-on-one conversation, maybe it came out that somebody had some programming background and you didn't know of. They were doing it on the side. Isn't that something that you may or may not want to develop if it helps your team? AI didn't know that. Doesn't show up in their formal job analysis, doesn't show up in their job description, none of that. So think about it. This isn't just assigning training modules. It's not mandatory training or company training. That's not what I'm talking about here. This is the belief in someone. This is our ability to challenge them and then walk them through that growth. And the reason AI can't do it is, again, it can recommend courses, it can populate and put things on the training plans of our employees, but it can't identify that skill gap. I mean, let's think about it. How many people are on development plans that may or may not be AI generated? You know, these are the things that we have to think about. So how do we put something like this in practice? Maybe a project opportunity. So you have a project that you want somebody to lead, and they don't think that they're ready, but you see it in them. A lot of times it's just saying, hey, I'm giving you this project because I think you're ready. Even if you don't feel ready, I'm going to be right here if you need me, and we're going to walk through this together. The other big piece that I always say is standing up for people when they're not in the rooms. I don't know how many times that over the past probably 2 months that I've had a conversation without that individual in the room because things were miscommunicated or they were just out of perspective. Those are the things that when I talk about this skill of developmental judgment, that's what it looks like, and that's what it means to put it into practice. So what's the fourth skill, John? The fourth one, emotional regulation. And I want emotional regulation specifically under pressure. I was listening to a podcast. It was a Jocko Willis podcast and his leadership course or his leadership models that they put together. But they talk about this theory of detachment. And that's why I put this on here, is it's our ability as leaders, as bosses, as managers out there to stay calm. The ability to stay calm, to keep clear, and remain steady when everything else around us may be burning, may be chaotic. It really, your team, well, I'm just going to say always, your team will always get emotional cues from you. And so when you're rattled, this could come out through your voice. If it's scratchy or you begin to yell. I mean, how many times, and think about even our families. There was an example on the podcast, and they were talking about, we could be the perfect professional boss at work, but how you do one thing is how you do everything. And if you're not that way at home, if you're emotionally, you got to peel you off the wall every time a little thing happens, you're not practicing this skill. So stay grounded. And one of the reasons that AI isn't going to even come close to being able to do emotional regulation under pressure is it doesn't feel pressure. And it sounds like an advantage, right? Because you can feed it information and it gives you maybe a perspective that's unemotional. But our ability as humans to feel the pressure, right? That's what earns respect. Because everybody around us knows that the pressure is there, but you as that leader, you're going to stay calm, you're going to stay cool, and you're going to stay grounded. So what does this practice what does this specific skill look like? So when emotional regulation is in practice, is in action, things that seem very stressful. Again, back to the situation. When we were bringing people back to work, it was a very stressful situation. We didn't have all the answers. And I was going back to work myself. So I felt that too. And I was honest with the team. I feel it too. I go, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do. Today, and this, I coined the phrase, I'm going to be where my feet are. Today, my feet are here, talking to you. This is what I know. Tomorrow, it has a bunch of unknowns, but we will attack that when we get there. It's not reacting in that moment, even though you may be anxious and you may be nervous about the unknown. But it's our ability to simply process and then respond with intention. I'm not telling you to be a robot here, because then you'd be just like AI. So allow yourself to respond with that intent, and then be vulnerable and just simply give the information that you can give. So those 4 skills, right? One of the things that, research tells us, and this research comes from the World Economic Forum, they report that employees expect 39% of workers' core skills to change by 2030. Now, AI is going to be a big part of that. Big data, they top the list, right, of the fastest growing technical skills. But we're talking about human skills in this lesson, in this pod. So creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, leadership, those are the skills that remain. Those are the ones that are going to remain at the top. But now the currency, the value of those things are going to go through the roof. So look at these 4 skills. Here's what again, this is the action piece. Look at these 4 skills and then honestly assess yourself. Each one, I want you to scale yourself, give you a rating, 1 to 10. Where do you stand on each one? The trust architect, contextual judgment, the development or developmental investment, and then emotional regulation under pressure, right? So where is your lowest score? That's going to be where you're going to start. That's going to be your biggest opportunity that you're going to have to increase that, close the gap, and make the most impact. So now that you've gotten the concrete plan, we've talked about it, all right? We're going to start building these skills, not someday, but you're going to do it tomorrow, this week. We're going to get into how to future-proof that leadership plan. And I'm going to call this the irreplaceability plan, because this is designed to help you shift from doing work that AI can handle to doing work that only you can do. And there's 3 phases here. And if you've been following me, I love the rule of 3, but one of the other things that I really love is audits. And the first phase is going to be the time audit. And we talked about this in leadership episode. I believe it was the one around AI leadership audit. And it was episode 325. So it was last episode. If you haven't done that, go back, take a listen to it, because I want you to do it now. And the gist of it is, you're going to list every single reoccurring task. You're going to sort them into 3 buckets. Well, first bucket is what AI can own. The second one is what AI can assist. And then the third one is what really only we as humans can do. And the goal here is to identify the tasks that you're doing that don't require you, so you can stop doing those and start doing what does require you. Because what I found when I do these audits with folks is that most of my clients, they find about 40 to 60% of the work that they're doing doesn't leverage anything with their human value. So that's where we're going to get into phase 2, and we're going to talk about the shift. We're going to reallocate our time to high value leadership. So phase 1, we've identified those things. Phase 2, now we're shifting. Things like manually completing status reports. AI can handle that. So what do we need to start? Now we need to start developing that trust so we can have conversations, 1 trust building conversation a day. We can do it in our performance evaluations, however that looks for you. And again, these are just examples, but there are things, I promise, you're going to be able to stop that 40 to 60%. Things like writing routine follow-ups on emails, right? Or preparing meeting agendas, deadlines, project timelines, sending out those reminders. Those are things that we can automate. So what can we start? Things like conducting our growth conversations. Remember back to that skill. Where do people want to develop? Making a judgment call that we don't have all the information for. Or it may be mentoring. It may be coaching someone who needs our help. And again, it seems like a lot of work, but when you go through that audit and you start to make that shift, it's going to pay off infinitely, because it's not about working less. You probably actually, well, it's going to stretch you, so it's going to feel like more work, but it's doing the right things. It's working on the right things. It's making that shift from time spent on our teams to time spent with the team. In that piece alone, that's the gold. Because as we get into phase 3 and we talk about building, we're going to develop our irreplaceable skills deliberately. So I'm going to give you a weekly plan. In this weekly plan, it's going to center around the 4 skills. You can break it up however you want to break it up. I'm just going to use a 5-day, Monday through Friday. And when I was mapping this out, one of the things that I recognized is, Saturday and Sunday didn't have much of anything. Those Saturday and Sunday, I take the 4 and I work on them with my family because I'm at home majority of the time. I work a Monday through Friday gig. So I'm going to challenge you, do one of these things each week, but then use that Saturday, Sunday to work on all 4 with your family. And again, you're modeling and it's going to teach them. So this is just going to perpetuate, right? So Monday, I want you to work on trust architecture. I want you to have one transparent conversation. Maybe that looks like sharing something real about a challenge or a decision that we're needing to make, okay? Tuesday, we're going to work on contextual judgment. And I want you to make one decision that you've been putting off. You've been postponing because you did not have all the data. You're going to trust your gut, trust your experience, and you're going to make that decision. Wednesday, we're going to work on the developmental assessment. So we're going to have one growth conversation. We're going to tell somebody that we believe in them. We're going to tell somebody that we see potential in them, even though they may not see it in themselves. And then Thursday, it's that emotional regulation. So in our most stressful moments, a lot of times this is on a drive to work. Just going to be very honest with you. I want you to pause 10 seconds before you respond. Then you're going to process, and then you're going to lead. And again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. You're rewiring your brain not to just automatically fire back. These 10 seconds may seem like a long time at first, but they are going to wire your brain to a mode where you don't emotionally respond to comments, people cutting you off, or a bad decision that you just don't agree with, okay? And then Friday, you're going to reflect back. And this is where journaling is going to come into, and I don't know how many journals I have, but I want you to journal how the week went and how each one of the days. This can be 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not asking you to write an entire journal or fill up all the paper in the journal, but what did you learn? What was the biggest impact that you learned? And then where did you default? Where did you maybe fall back into that trap of task management? And one of the things that, I use this, we talk about the lead framework, but it ties into the lead framework here because when we talk about listening, we're freeing up time to actually listen to what our team needs from us. That envisioning part. So we're envisioning the leader that we need to become by working through the 3 phases that we talked about. We're aligning our daily actions with the skills that are going to make us irreplaceable, okay? Every single day, I want you to ask yourself, am I doing the work that requires me to be human? And then we're going to drive the change. Don't wait for the organization to tell you. Don't wait for them to say, hey, John, what can you do that AI can't? Start crafting that answer now. Start shifting yourself. One of the things, and we're going to wrap it up here, as we're landing, I hope that this was valuable because your assignment before this week is over, I want you to do 2 things, okay? 2 things, not a lot, 2 things. First, score yourself. Remember 1 to 10 on each one of those 4 replaceable skills: the trust architect, the contextual judger, the development mental investor, and then the emotional regulation piece. So that's the first task, 1 to 10 on each one of those. Second, pick your lowest score and then commit to one action from that weekly calendar, Monday through Friday, right? Just one skill, one action. That's how you're going to start becoming the the leader that AI is never going to be able to replace. So let's bring this home. The recap. First, the divide, that divide that is forming between leaders who manage tasks and leaders who build culture. AI is eliminating. They're getting rid of. Organizations are restructuring the need for task managers out there. But the demand for true leadership, those cultural architects, now you're going to be able to command the salary that you want. That is going to be the skill that is going to put you ahead of your peers. The second thing we talked about were the 4 skills. Those skills AI is never going to replace. Okay, so these are what make you worth more than any stinking system out there. And then third, now you have a plan. You have a plan to audit your time, make your shift to those high value activities and work, and then you're going to build your skills deliberately. One task, one action, 1 week at a time. Start there. So here's what I want you to remember. As always, AI isn't going to replace leaders, but leaders who use AI will replace those who don't. So this isn't about becoming a tech expert. You don't have to know every single detail about every single AI. It's about becoming so deeply human in your leadership that no technology could ever do what you do. And the leaders who shift will be the ones who thrive this year. So don't let AI scare you. Let AI handle the admin. Let AI handle the reporting. And then use the time that you get back to build the trust, to develop your people, and to make those hard calls. That's why you've built that experience. I have 20 years of leadership development experience, and I use that experience to communicate these things. So we're developing leaders all the time, every single day. So if this episode hit home, here's what you can do for me. 1, share it. Share it with a leader who needs to hear this right now. Someone who may be nervous. That's all they talk about, is how AI implementation is going to take their job, because it will. So prepare them. Help them be irreplaceable. Maybe someone who's doing the same things the same ways for years. Send them the episode. The second thing, subscribe, hit that notification bell. We're getting ready to talk about, shifting gears to AI tool sets that I use. So you're not going to want to miss that, because again, they're going to create the time that you'll be able to flow back into your work or to your team. All right. And then 3, drop a comment. So I want you to tell me which one of those 4 irreplaceable skills that we mentioned was your lowest score, and then what are you doing to increase and close that gap? Put it in writing. All right, until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and keep building those cultures out there that your teams need to thrive. I believe in you. Go be great. Talk to everyone on the next episode.